Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the DFS show for February the 10th. Small little two-game slate this evening. If you're new to the show, just a reminder, everything you see on today's show will be available to you if you become a DFO Premium subscriber. Everything was up this afternoon around 1 o'clock. So you get all this information much earlier in the day if you become a Premium subscriber. Don't mind the toque here. Sorry, it's a little frigid outside. Just kind of rushed in from outside to get today's show going. Minus I think 16 or something here today. So it's not great. But still nothing in comparison to what they're dealing with out west right now. But still cold enough for me. So don't mind the toque look today. But yeah, we got a two-game slate tonight. It's going to be a little weird. It's actually for a two-game slate, it's not bad. There's a lot of different spots that you can go tonight if you're playing the two-game slate. Sometimes it's kind of just a shitty two-game slate with two really obvious lines, and you stack those two and kind of just hope that they go off, and you can differentiate your lineups elsewhere, by playing the chalk. But pretty good two-game slate, all things considered tonight. The NHL finally got something right tonight too, starting one game at 7 p.m., the other game at 7:30. I think that's the first time that this has happened all season. Every single night, man, it's a nightmare. We got every single game on intermission at the exact same time. It's absolutely brutal. Thanks to TBL 1 and 3 advice. Yeah. So it kind of sucked. After the show, I was on TV a little bit, but not, as heavy as I was with the other lines. But then as soon as I saw in warmups that Nashville scratched Howlett and Cousins, and then the way they made their lineup up, it just looked horrendous. So I actually pivoted quite a bit to Tampa Bay last night. And then I onslaught stacked them in the turbo slate and almost got a takedown, which was great. So I would have been way more on Tampa during the show had I known that's what Nashville was going to do with their lineup last night. But still, obviously last night was a little bit rough. Tampa Bay or Florida 1 was just a fucking nightmare. I don't know how you play 18 minutes against the Red Wings and produce. I think Barkov had one shot, the other two had nothing. It was just brutal. So I mean, it's going to happen some nights, but it was just such a good spot. They should not have busted us like that, but it is what it is. We're gonna we did hit a couple other spots. Calgary 3 was a really good play. Frickin' San Jose 2 got off to a great start, scored a minute in, and then kind of just fell asleep after that. But we did find some okay spots. But Florida 1, obviously a massive letdown last night. And then I don't know if you guys saw the stat, but yesterday was the first time Edmonton won a game without Draisaitl or McDavid scoring since 2017 or something like that, which is just insane to me. But all right, let's get into tonight's slate. Like I said, two-game slate. We got Georgiev going. It is his 25th birthday. If you want to play that narrative card, he's starting for sure. For the Rangers, it does look like Tuukka Rask want to make his third straight start for the Bruins. Meanwhile, Carey Price and Frederik Andersen are going to be in the 7:30 game. Rematch of the season opener between those two, which was an absolute thriller. So hopefully we get a similar type of game tonight between the Canadiens and the Maple Leafs. So yeah, like I said, a lot of really good lines on this slate, and it's going to be interesting to see how you can build your lineup to win some money tonight, because there are some intriguing mid-priced options, but then obviously Boston 1 and Austin Matthews super expensive but also super good. So it's going to be a good slate, I think, for all things considered, given it's only a two-gamer. So yeah, here let's just jump right into this one here. So the first game, Boston won, obviously grades out as the top stack in that game. It's pretty obvious that they're one of the best lines in hockey. David Pastrnak really hasn't missed a beat at all since coming back from injury. He's been red hot. But up there, 8,500. The whole line to full stack them is 23,800. So, on a small slate, it's a little bit easier to full stack them and find other players elsewhere, because it's not all the value is going to hit tonight, right? On a big slate, it's hard to full stack them and find the correct value, but on a smaller slate, not all the value is going to hit, and lower scores will win. So it's a little bit easier of a night to just full stack them and try to cram stuff in. And then hopefully you get lucky, or hopefully none of the value goes off, and then, you're a little bit of value works out. So obviously a really good spot for Boston 1 tonight. If we look at the matchup, they're, 78% of their ice time is going to be coming against the Rangers top 6. And then if we look at the Rangers top 6, realistically, all 4 of these teams have been pretty good defensively so far this season. So like some of the worst numbers on the slate is 25 scoring chances against, which isn't really normally the case. But in terms of this is all weighted based on tonight's slate, and New York too looks like one of the worst defensive lines on this slate. So obviously a pretty good opportunity for Boston 1 here. Given the fact that the Rangers' top six isn't all that great defensively, although they're not terrible. So we could be looking at a couple of potentially low-scoring games. But still, somebody's got to score some goals in these games, and Boston 1 definitely looks like they're in a primo spot to do that. The second line grades out below average on tonight's slate, but I don't mind them at all. So yesterday they practiced, the Bruins that is, they practiced with 5 forwards on the top power play unit. It is, we've talked about it on the show a little bit. It is something that they've tinkered with throughout the last few games while Matt Grzelcyk was out. Matt Grzelcyk will be back in, but even with Grzelcyk at practice, they did go with a 5 forward on the top power play look. Whether or not that's kind of just, tinkering in practice and something that is actually going to carry over to the game remains to be seen. If I were to put money on it, I would imagine that we will see a little bit of the 5 forward power play unit, and we'll also see a little bit of Matt Grzelcyk on that top unit as well. But the fact that they're even just kind of messing around with it in practice leads me to believe that there is, some merit to the fact that they're actually going to use it tonight. And for me, that definitely puts Nick Ritchie and David Krejci, who are going to be the 2 forwards that round out that power play unit, definitely in play for me tonight at 4,200 and 4,100. 2 of the best value plays on this slate for sure. As we can see here, Boston's power play clicking at 33% right now. Really good clip. Obviously, the Rangers' penalty kill has been pretty solid at 82%, but the Bruins can get things going on the PP any given night. And with if they do go with that 5 forward look, I think that Nick Ritchie and David Krejci are definitely interesting plays. If you want to go, like given their price, you can kind of build interesting lineups tonight, like power play. You can power play stack Boston's whole top unit with 5 forwards, which is something you can never really do, and then punt some defensemen elsewhere, whether it's K-Andre Miller, TJ Brody, somebody like that, with the other games. And then, so you can build unique lineups, I think, with those 5 forwards, and hopefully they all end up on the top power play unit. And I think that's a good way to get different tonight on a night where, there's some pretty obvious chalky spots. So I think that's going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a super low owned play, but I definitely think, it's not going to be super popular either. If you want to fade Boston 1 and go with Boston 2, more power to you. It's definitely a scary proposition. I've mentioned it. It's scary to fade Boston 1 on a 9-game slate, and it's even scarier to do so on a 2-game slate. But definitely still some interest in Boston 2. You can full stack with Craig Smith. I've always liked Craig Smith's shot volume. So there's definitely merit to full stacking Boston 2, especially if you're building multiple lineups. I think they're okay. We do want to look at their matchup a little bit. Obviously, I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on all of these lines tonight, just because it is only 2 games. So hopefully it's not too boring for you. Bear with me if it is, and we'll get to the part of the show that you're looking forward to. And if just a reminder, if you guys are new to the show, you can ask questions at any period of time in the chat, and I will answer all of them as I go along here. So Boston 2 expected to see the majority of the Artemi Panarin line, which, as I mentioned, is the worst defensive line on paper right now for the Rangers. I guess the worst defensive line really is the Howden line, but it's pretty close either way. Obviously a good matchup for them. They are going to see a little bit of Mika Zibanejad as well, which he hasn't been all that great. As I mentioned there, though, for a second, Brett Howden line really bad. If we look at the D score tonight, they are the worst line defensively on the entire slate. So if you want to continue to kind of get deeper and deeper in the Bruins roster, I think Jake DeBrusk, Charlie Coyle mini, it's super cheap. Charlie Coyle at 3,000 is insanely cheap. Jake DeBrusk makes his return to the lineup. They're going to play together on PB2. Basically that means they're going to get 20 seconds per power play, if that. So not a whole lot to like there. But if you're like full stacking the Maple Leafs or game stacking, Montreal, Toronto, you could do worse than a Coyle DeBrusk mini at 7,100 combined for the 2 of them. So I think just given the matchup with Brett Howden, that is a line that continues to be a pretty leaky defensively. I mean, the Corsi against 65 here means that they give up a ton of opportunities at their net. The scoring chances isn't crazy high, but the high danger chances is. So it looks like that there is definitely a chance here where Boston 3 can get through against this Howden line. Moving on, all three of the Rangers lines grade out below average right now. And that's just a combination of two things. For one, they just haven't been that good. I mean, only 24 scoring or 20 scoring chances 4/60 for the Mika's advantage ad line. So I haven't really been on him at all season. He just still seems to be in a funk. Hasn't really got things going. So, his price is low enough now to where you can definitely start to be like, if screw it, I'm just going to take a chance on him. It's, you're very rarely going to be able to stack Kreider, Zibanejad, Buchnevich full stack for just over 14,000. That's not something that's, we've been, accustomed to seeing over the last year and a half here. So they're definitely okay. Maybe you play them at that price. It's super low. And then you hope that tonight is the night that they figure it out. I think obviously a matchup with the Bruins is not necessarily one where you're like, okay, yeah, this is one where they're going to get things going. The Bruins are obviously a really good team. So again, I do prefer New York too a little bit. I just, Ryan Strome, just 3,400 is incredibly cheap for somebody that gets to play beside Panarin the entire game and is on the top power play unit. Capo Caco minimum price. Absolutely love that. He's looked okay in recent games, has had some pretty good scoring chances and just hasn't been able to capitalize. So at 2,500, I mean, it doesn't get much better. It doesn't get much better than him. Why is isn't Josh Anderson in the optimizer? I have no idea. I will look into that as soon as the show is over. Makes no sense. But yeah, so Ryan Strome, Capo Caco, super cheap. If you're going to fade like one of, let's say you're fading Montreal and you want to try to play like Matthews and Boston 1 together or something like that, or maybe Pasternak with Toronto 1 or something like that. I think that mini stacking Strome and Kako, even throwing in Keandre Miller in there too, is a good way to do that. There's not really much better value than Capo Caco at 2,500. Ryan Strome 3,400 is probably the best value on the entire slate in my opinion. Still not a great matchup, but on a 2-game slate, it's slim pickings. So Strome and Kako, super cheap. And then Panarin, even if you want to full stack them, 5,800 is ridiculously cheap for Panarin. He's been pretty hot as of late as well. So, I have no problem full stacking them. If you're making multiple lineups, it's definitely my preferred play from the Rangers. I just don't love Mika's Zibanejad's line right now. But yeah, Panarin's been really hot. As of late, had goals in 3 of his last 5 games, points in 4 of his last 5. Shot volume is really strong. So Panarin at 5,800 is a no-brainer. If you're kind of making a little bit more of a balanced lineup, Panarin is a terrific one-off, arguably the best one-off on the slate, just given his price. So absolutely love him in this spot tonight. Like, yeah, Zibanejad is cheap at 5,000, but I still prefer Panarin at 5,800. So that's who I would play if I'm playing New York. As I mentioned, Keandre Miller stacking with them keeps the price really low. He's been really solid. In the last 2 weeks, he is the 4th highest DraftKings point defenseman on average on tonight's slate. So I think he's only 2,700, so he's super cheap and super viable tonight. So let me just fix this up a little bit here while we're talking. So the second game, obviously, it's going to be a lot of Philip Deneau against Austin Matthews, but that still doesn't stop Austin Matthews. New York 2 or Boston 3? I would go New York 2 for sure. Like Boston 3 is in an okay spot, but that's only if you're desperate. I really how much? What did I say? Coyle was it? Yeah, obviously Coyle Nebraska is even more expensive than Kako and Strome. So I much prefer Kako and Strome, just given the salary savings. They should see much more ice time as well, playing with Artemi Panarin. So I prefer New York 2 to Boston 3 tonight. But on a small slate, Boston 3, like I said, a pretty good matchup with Brett Howden. But Toronto 1 still comes out on top tonight, strictly because their offensive numbers are just outstanding, averaging over 36 scoring chances, 4/60, 16 high danger chances. So some of the best offensive numbers on tonight's slate. Obviously, Austin Matthews is scoring at a ridiculous clip right now. It seems almost impossible to keep that guy off the board right now. But like I said, they are going to be playing about 46% of their ice time against Philip Deneau, 31% against Nick Suzuki. So that's almost their entire game against those two lines. And those are 2 of the best defensive lines in hockey right now. Philip Deneau, really good. Their line, only 18 scoring chances against. Meanwhile, the Suzuki line, pretty similar numbers really across the board. It's been impressive to see what Suzuki's been able to do. And as I've mentioned on this show before, Montreal 1 always grades out pretty well, but they lack the elite goal scorers to capitalize on a lot of those chances, where that's not really the case with Montreal too. Josh Anderson looks like maybe the best goal scorer on that team. Tyler Toffoli's obviously been outstanding as well. So those two additions have been terrific for them. But I still always prefer Montreal too. Their lines or their numbers are almost identical, and I just think that there's a lot more actual talent in terms of finishing on that second line. So, but either way, like I said, it's going to be a bit of a tough matchup for Matthews tonight, but on a small slate, it's going to be difficult to fade him. I do prefer Boston 1 to Toronto 1 tonight. Just because I think that, the first time around, though, like Matthews handled Danault. I think that the Corsi 4 was like 75% in favor of Matthews. So he can definitely is more than capable to absolutely handle that Danault line. But we've seen Danault shut down some really, really good lines this season already. And last year he was just outstanding. So there is a, I think, more of an avenue towards Matthews busting tonight than there is with Boston 1 busting. So, but still, obviously, outstanding play to play Toronto 1 tonight. I do have quite a bit of interest in Toronto 2 because their price is just outstanding. They grade out at pretty well. I think the fourth or fifth best line of the night. But John Tavares just 5,700. William Nylander under 5K now. I even like, full stacking if you want to. Ilya Mikheyev at 2,900. He's expected to see some power play time. The thing that's really interesting about the Leafs tonight is they've after one game they've taken John Tavares off that top power play unit again. So if you are stacking Toronto 1, I mentioned a little while ago, a couple shows ago, Wayne Simmons was an interesting play to plug in there with them at mid price. And on a 2-game slate and where you're going to be digging for value, I think you could do worse than Nick Petan. 2,500. He's only going to see, fourth line minutes. So maybe 8 minutes at 5v5 tonight. But he is going to be on power play 1. He is a guy that, has produced some, relatively reasonable offensive numbers throughout his career. So at mid price, if you're playing Matthews and Marner and you want to try to jam in, Boston 1 or some of these other high priced options, then plugging Nick Petan in with them is a good way to get different. He'll be like 3% owned, if that, tonight. So, I think that he's a decent play at minimum price if you're playing Toronto 1. If you're playing Toronto 2, then really no need to at all because their price is so low. So I do like Tavares, Nylander. If you want a full stack with Mikheyev, that's fine too. Super cheap at 2,900, and I do like TJ Brody quite a bit at 3,000. But if you're playing the Matthews line, I still would stack them with Justin Holl if you want to correlate defensively. If you're going Toronto 2, I would go TJ Brody. But let's just take a look at Toronto 2 here for a second. They grade out really well. Obviously, as I mentioned, their price is really good. And I have a slight, preference towards Toronto 2 tonight over Toronto 1 just because of the price. Like, you can play Toronto 2 with Boston 1 pretty easily, and it allows you to still, play some half-decent forwards. Like, you can play Toronto 2 with Brody and Boston 1, no problem. So Toronto 2 expected to see 35% of their ice time against the third line. Like, the problem is with Montreal, you don't get like a reprieve. Like, every single one of their lines is good defensively. Thanks for the content. Hope to see this channel/site grow. Yes, no problem. It seems like it's growing every single night. If you guys keep smashing the like button, that'll help even more. But yeah, that's the plan. Keep growing. The website is massive, but the show, not so much. But we're getting there. Moving up every day. NHL DFS is very underrated. People should, we've seen it grow a little bit. The contests are getting better this year on DraftKings. I think the fact that the rest of the world has nothing to do right now definitely helps. Like, I started playing NASCAR DFS and PGA DFS like crazy. Like, I've always been a big PGA guy, but during the lockdown, it's might as well do something. So I'm hoping that more people will start to migrate towards NHL, and that's kind of what I'm here for, right? I want to try to help some new users get into it and figure out who to play on any given night. But back into things. So Montreal 3 is, the most exploitable line for the Canadians. It's still not a bad line at all. The numbers will actually improve a little bit too. If Yoel Armia, he's a game time decision. It remains to be seen whether or not he even plays. They would not confirm whether or not he'd be back in. And it's unclear even if he does. Like, Perry's been pretty good for them, and they've really liked him on the top power play unit. So I would imagine Corey Perry would stay in the lineup. So it could be a spot where Armia comes in and just replaces somebody like Arturi Lehkonen on the fourth line and fills in for his penalty killing role, and kind of they ease him back into the lineup. But either way, like I said, not a lot of bad defensive lines on tonight's slate, but Montreal 3 does give up a little bit more than average. They play a very kind of high event game. Yes, Barry Kotkaniemi and Tyler Toffoli have looked really solid, but it is a spot like I would much rather play. See Tavares go out and play. What was it? I'd rather have 35% of my ice time come against Kotkaniemi than 46% of my ice time come against Philip Deneau line. So that's just kind of a little explanation and reasoning behind why I like Toronto 2 a little bit more. And, I think the main factor really is just their price. I mean, they're just so cheap given their skill set. Obviously, they've gone cold after a really hot start, but hopefully they can kind of heat back up tonight. On the Montreal side of things, I mentioned I prefer Montreal 2, and that is the case. Again, Montreal 3 comes out a little bit on top, but that's just because of their underlying numbers, but they don't actually capitalize on as many chances as you'd like to see. So let's go back to the matchups here. Montreal 2 expected to see a little bit more of the Kerfoot line, less of the Matthews line, than what the Deneau line will see. That's not the best case scenario. Kerfoot's line has been arguably the best defensively for the Leafs so far this season, but it's just like I said, there's just so much more skill on that second line than there is on that first line. And I'm not paying $6,100 for Brendan Gallagher when I can pay $5,000 for Josh Anderson, and they're on the same power play unit. So I much prefer Montreal 2 tonight. I probably won't play any of Montreal 1. I almost never do. I let other people chase kind of those underlying numbers and just hope that they continue to just get shots on net, but not actually, or get shots towards net, not even on net, and just not really pay off their price. Obviously, Tyler Toffoli is in play. If you, like I said on previous shows, I don't mind playing Toffoli with Suzuki and Anderson. If you kind of if you want to get wild tonight, I think an interesting way to construct your lineup would be like Suzuki, Anderson, Toffoli, and Petrie, kind of like a Canadians power play stack. That'll be, I would imagine, very low owned in comparison to some of these other stacks. I think a lot of the ownership is obviously going to go towards Boston 1 and Toronto 1. So if you go with the Canadians power play stack and they get hot, you score a couple goals on Anderson tonight, I think that'll definitely get you in the money, just because I don't think it'll be super high owned, and you can still get in some of those other decent options because they're not like overly expensive. Obviously, Petrie's, I think, 6,200 to fully 6,700. They're up there, and that's why they're going to be so low owned, because people are going to be spending their money on Pasternak. They're going to be spending their money on Matthews. So a bit of a contrarian option, which I don't think is a bad one at all. The Maple Leafs have the worst penalty kill on the entire slate tonight. Montreal's power play, obviously not amazing, only 22%, but that's still not a terrible rate. So I think that is definitely an interesting way to go on this slate, just because it's not like it's bad. Foley's been red hot, and it's not going to be high owned in comparison to some of these other lines. Toronto tennis and EPL are my substitutes for NHL. See, I know absolutely nothing about either one of those sports, so I can't get into it. Like, golf is awesome. I just hate how you have to like wait 4 days to get paid out and sometimes lose. NASCAR, I had like 3 takedowns in NASCAR last year, which is hilarious because like I hadn't watched a NASCAR race in like a decade. Toronto 2 or Montreal 2. I do prefer Toronto 2 a little bit. But like I said, Montreal 2 is outstanding as well. I would lean a little bit towards Toronto 2 because the matchup is pretty solid, and I think that their price, like I think Anderson at 5,000, that's a pretty decent representation of his skill set. He could probably be maybe more around 5,500, but 5,700 for John Tavares is far too low. And I do prefer him over Nick Suzuki, just because Suzuki, like, yeah, he gets on the board a lot, but he doesn't shoot a ton. So he's constantly a risky play, because unless he's not picking up assists, he doesn't pay off his value. Where John Tavares, he could hit the 5-shot bonus on any given night. So I do prefer Toronto 2, just because I think that their floor is a little bit more stable, and especially with Tavares being only like $500 more than Suzuki. What's my DK handle? I'm Seguin 77 with the DraftKings logo, or not DraftKings, Daily Faceoff logo. Do you like Boston 1 over Toronto 1 tonight? Yes, I do. I just think it's a better matchup. Montreal can suffocate you. The Rangers, they haven't been too bad defensively this year, but I think it's definitely a matchup where, Boston 1 can definitely outplay Toronto 1 tonight. Any tips for building Showdown lineups? I don't play a ton of Showdown. I've started to play a little bit more this year. I usually only play games or slates where, I guess games, where there's obvious value that I like. So I am playing the Boston slate tonight because I love Kakko's price. I love Strom's price. I love Boston 1. So I don't really, I would hate to give you tips because I don't play it enough to really be good at it. The one tip I guess I would give is still, I think you still got to stick with the stacking as much as you can because it increases your upside. So if you're going to play the Boston game tonight, like stuff Boston 1 in there, maybe captain one of them and maximize your upside by stacking all of them. And then hopefully they just go berserk and then you've got all three. And, maybe other people try to build more balanced lineups and by having all three, you go off in comparison to them. But like I said, I don't play it enough to really be able to give you any true helpful tips. But I would just try to find some value and stuff those guys in there and play all the big dogs. Like tonight, I think I captained Marchand, and it allows you to play like New York 2 with them and something like that. But I still, it's scary because like I think you want to play Rask tonight too. Like this is definitely a game where the Bruins could win like 4-2 and then you're going to want Rask as well. So it's tough. Like that's a tough slate because you want Boston 1, you want Rask, but then what else do you do? Like you play Kakko and I don't know, Sean Corrali. Boston minus 1.5. Sure. If you want to, it's not really much of a betting show, but if you want to, yeah, I think like I said, I think this is a game where they can definitely win 4-2. I do like the Bruins quite a bit. I think they're minus 155 or 150. It's a little light for me, but the Rangers are just kind of an anomaly, right? Like I still think there's better days ahead for the Rangers. And they really haven't been, too terrible defensively, but the Bruins are just phenomenal. Like that's why the Rangers scare me. Like I think this is definitely a game where, the Rangers could lose this game 4-1 and then, New York 2 busts, but what are you going to do? Thanks. Any info helps. Yeah. Like if you find your value, like I think like, I don't know how high owned he will be. I'd imagine he will be because there's not a whole lot of good value on that slate, but Kakko was just tremendous. I think he's like 3K in Showdown or something like that. It's way too cheap. But yeah, let's talk about the cheap defensemen and some goalies here. Obviously I guess I can talk about all the defensemen. I think you could probably play Matt Grzelcyk at 4,100 if you want to play Boston 1, if you can fit that salary in there. A lot of these people use daily face-off that play DraftKings. A lot of these people just use the beat writers too. And they're showing that it's going to be 5 forwards on the top power play unit. So a lot of Grzelcyk's appeal is the top power play unit. But like I said, I'd be surprised if they go with 5 forwards on that top unit the entire night. I think there's definitely going to be some Grzelcyk there. So the fact that he's, being shown on the second unit, both on Daily Faceoff and on Twitter, I think will definitely help keep his ownership down. So that could be a decent way for you to leverage the field by playing Grzelcyk with Boston 1 and then just kind of hoping that, first power play comes out and Grzelcyk's on the top unit with them. Jacob Trouba still way too cheap at 3,500. Didn't do great the other night, only 4.3 DraftKings points for us, but steadily over 20 minutes a night. And like I mentioned last show, he blocked 9 shots the game before. So that's kind of always a possibility for him. Obviously, we're not expecting 9 blocks, but we'll take it. And if he only blocks 3 and gets a couple shots on net, that's just fine. So I really like Trouba. I prefer Trouba over K'Andre Miller, but if you can't afford it, Miller obviously tremendous at 2,700 as well. They both they play together. I mean, they offer almost the exact same floor. Miller is a little bit cheaper, so obviously he is allows you to play other better players, but I just trust Trouba a little bit more, and it's not like the price difference is massive. So other than that, though, there's not a whole lot of cheap defensemen. I think Miller is going to be super high owned. The one thing I will maybe say is when you're going and clicking K Miller tonight, make sure you click K'Andre Miller, not Kevin Miller from the Bruins. They are right around the same price, and it looks the exact same on the website. So if you're building lineups fast, make sure you click K'Andre Miller, not Kevin Miller. Brandon Carlo is always another guy that I stack with Boston 1 just because he sees a lot of 5v5 ice time with him. He's not great, but he does chip in the occasional point, 3 points in 11 games so far this season. Is a guy that can block 3 shots in a game. And, he does pick up shots here and there. A couple 2-shot games so far this season. So he's not great, but he does correlate very well with Boston 1. And when you play Boston 1, you need to find cheap defensemen to play with them. And you could do much worse than Brandon Carlo. As I mentioned, depending on which way you're going with the Maple Leafs tonight, TJ Brody with Toronto 2, Justin Hall, they're $200 difference, Brody being $3,000, Hall being $2,800. Hall with Toronto 1, Brody with Toronto 2 is the way to go. The rest of these defensemen are pretty brutal. Joel Edmondson's okay if you're playing Montreal. I'd rather play some of these other cheaper guys that I've mentioned. If you are going to play Montreal, I do prefer Ben Sherratt. He's been heavily involved this season. His price hasn't really risen. It's actually come down a little bit. I think he was up over $4K for a bit. It's come back down to $3,700. So Sherratt looks really good at $3,700, both as, maybe you're building like a Toronto Boston heavy lineup and you need to get in a defenseman from the other two teams. You're going to be looking at Sherratt. You're going to be looking at Trouba. You're looking at K'Andre Miller. Romanoff is okay too at $3,900, but I would play Sherratt over him, a couple $100 cheaper, and the usage is much better with Sherratt. I shouldn't say much better because Romanoff gets good usage, gets power play exposure, but just more steady minutes for Sherratt, like over 20 every single night. Carlo or Hole, it depends who you're playing, but I would probably play Hole just because he's a couple $100 cheaper. And they're basically the same player. Like you're expecting the same thing out of them. But like I said, if you're playing Boston 1, then Carlo's good. But other than that, Hall is just a couple $100 cheaper, and he's it's the same player. Favorite goalie? Oh yeah, shit! I almost even talk about goalies. So goalies are tough. My favorite's definitely Rask. He's the most expensive, $8,200. But as seen here, this is they are the best defensive team on the slate by a mile. And the Rangers look like one of the worst offensive teams on the slate. So, I mean, if you put, 2 and 2 together there, you should get Tuukka Rask. I missed the opportunity there. Put 1 and 1 together, you get Tuukka Rask. Damn. It was right there. I missed it. But yeah, Tuukka's definitely my favorite. And then I think the rest is just kind of depending on who you're playing. If you're going Toronto heavy, then I think Anderson's fine at 7,800. Montreal, 34 shots, 4 per 60 at even strength. So the shot volume is definitely going to be there, or save volume, whatever way you want to word it, is definitely going to be there for Anderson. So if you're fading Montreal, play Anderson. If you're fading Toronto, play Price. Either way, I think they're both kind of in similar boats. This game's a bit of a toss-up. Both should see a decent amount of volume. Price saw 34 shots in the first game against the Maple Leafs. Anderson saw 24. But I'd expect that to be a little bit higher tonight. Just, the Leafs haven't been all that great at suppressing shots. They've given up 30, over 30 in 2 of their last 4 games, and I definitely, against a team like Montreal, it's definitely a game where they could give up a ton of shots tonight. So on a small slate, it's tough. Like I've mentioned it before. Like I think last week sometime, the Bruins were on another small slate and they were playing the Flyers, and I said, if you're planning on fading Boston 1, like if you're making multiple lineups and you're building lineups with no Boston 1 at all, then it makes sense to play Georgiev, in my opinion, especially at 7,300, because if you're not playing Boston 1, you're banking on them not scoring, and if they're not scoring, most likely Georgiev is going to have a good night. So just kind of it increases your ceiling and chances of winning if you build lineups like that, because if you're fading Boston 1, you're hoping that they don't put up 30 points each, right? And if they're not putting up 30 points, then Georgiev should have a good night. So if you're building multiple lineups, if you're fading Boston 1 in some lineups, Georgiev is fine too. So it's tough on a 4-game slate to really pick a favorite. But in lineups where you're playing Boston and maybe fading the Rangers, then obviously Tuukka Rask makes a lot of sense. But there's very few spots to go tonight, and depending on where you do go, that's just kind of going to lead you to a certain goaltender. This is delicious. But I guess if you guys don't have any more questions, if there's nothing else to really go over, I guess I do have a couple little things I could share with you. So all of these charts are available, again, at dailyfaceoff.com. Become a premium member for as little as $9.99 for a week. try it out. You get a lineup optimizer to go along with it as well. Get all these charts available much earlier in the day. It's especially important when you've got like big slates and you need, especially if you're building multiple lineups, you're going to want to get this information out. It is updated. It is updated throughout the day as well. So, I get it up as early as I can, usually up around 1 in the afternoon. But if teams start changing their lines and stuff, then I do go back, update it, re-up, and then put it back up with the new stats. So it is up to, I would say up to the minute because it takes a little while to update, but it's live essentially, updated. What is in the cup? It is a little Pink Whitney mix, Pink Whitney and lemonade. It's very good. I ran out of beer today, so this is a splash of club soda in there. Oh, so good. Sorry, I'm joining a bit late. Is Boston one your favorite stack? Yes. I just think they have a better chance at popping than Toronto 1 because Toronto 1's in a bit of a tough matchup. I don't think Georgiev is that good of a goaltender. Like he's okay, but like he's not Carey Price, put it that way. And the Rangers aren't as good defensively as Montreal, so I do prefer Boston 1 tonight, but obviously they are crazy expensive. If Patan plays PP1, most likely bumper spot, yeah, I would imagine so. It's going to be Marner, Riley, Matthews up top, Hyman net front, and then Patan kind of as a bumper floater. So yeah, he probably won't get a ton of touches, but at 2,500, if one goes off his chest like Patrick Hornquist last night, then outstanding. There's very few options that cheap. Like if we want to talk about cheap forwards, I actually don't mind Kotkaniemi at 3,600, especially because he's center. If you're not playing like Bergeron or Suzuki or Matthews, his shot volume has been getting up there. I still prefer Strome at 3,400, but Kotkaniemi is fine, especially if you want to go like it's a fully Kotkaniemi mini. I do like that price for him. Kako obviously 2,500, Patan 2,500. Lafreniere 2,900. He just hasn't been doing anything. I've mentioned it before. Like until he stops playing with Brett Howden, I'm not going to play him. But on a small slate, sure. But, I've mentioned my favorite cheap guys. I'm not going to just keep going over and over again. So I guess that's it for today's DFO DFS show. I guess what we can do really quick is go in and check out how many games there are tomorrow. It's always fun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with 4 postponed. Thank God for that. So yeah, great 10-game slate on tap tomorrow night. If you become a DFO premium subscriber, you get access to the lineup optimizer, the 5v5 score, which I showed you guys here. This is kind of what it looks like on the back end with all the matchup charts as well. And then we offer a Discord channel as well, which is new for all of our premium subscribers. You can come in, chat about it, chat with each other, chat with me about who to play tonight if you didn't get a chance to catch the show. And then we also provide breaking news in that channel. Obviously, that stuff's available on Twitter as well. I tweet that out. It's available on the website, but you're not obviously able to keep an eye on that at all times. So Discord kind of got it. If you got your notifications on, you can get notifications about players that are out. So that's a little bit helpful. Obviously, I get it as soon as it comes across in warm-ups. So then you guys can get it right away. So another little premium feature, and as I mentioned, continuing to add to this stuff as we go throughout the season. So join DFO Premium. We have a couple little things coming up soon too, where you can win free weeks, free months of DFO Premium by playing DraftKings. So I'll keep an eye out for those announcements in the coming days. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed another installment of the DFO DFS show. I'm Brock Seguin. We will see you guys back here tomorrow, same time for a 10-game slate. Good luck to everybody tonight.